Did you know that adopted children are more likely to have learning disabilities?
And today we're going to tell you how we figured out that our children had learning disabilities.
You're listening to the Guthrie Family Podcast, a podcast where we encourage you in raising your kids and inspire you to grow in your relationships. We're your hosts. I'm Danny.
And I'm Haley. Join us as we love, encourage, and grow. So we have, as most of you know, we've adopted 5 children from foster care. 4 of them are genetic or biologically same mom, same dad.
They're biologically the same.
No, I didn't know how to say that. And one of them came from a different family. So we started noticing when our kids were going to school, started school, and really before then for some of them, that we were having a lot of problems learning certain things. And so...
and actually before then, it was a lot about listening. You know, we talked a little bit about this, like we would tell them things over and over and over, and they would continue to do the same thing. And we just got really, really frustrated and was wondering why they just couldn't listen. But it materialized itself even more when they got in school. So
yes, we did have some behavioral issues and things like that, which we still do have some behavioral issues, which... we'll kind of go into that as we talk about learning disabilities, how behavioral issues tie into learning disabilities. So going back to the causes, so, you know, a lot of kids who are not adopted have learning disabilities as well. Some of ours have their own facets of learning issues, also our biological children. So, but we bring that up because this has become so near and dear to our heart because we really want to see our children be successful. And if you have a hard time learning and you don't excel, then how we look at in the future, are our children going to be successful or not?
Right. And not only excel, but just keeping up.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right now, we're just having a hard time keeping up.
We have also found that, you know, with our children being adopted, there's an issue that we don't deal with, and that's guilt. So sometimes with our kids that are our biological children, we feel guilt when our children are not able to do certain things because we feel like, did we not do something? Did we, you know, is it that cup of coffee I had every day? Things like that come into play. And I just, you know, with adopted children, you don't have as much of that. Now, I'm just going to say this, you know, my saying is, it is what it is. So you have to kind of let go of things. And there's so many reasons for children to have learning disabilities. One of the most common causes are genetic. And so it's very likely that there's going to be someone in your family who has a learning disability, and that can be passed through. And sometimes it can even skip generations. There's also other causes. There are neurobiological, which are things like being premature. So your neurological system didn't fully develop, you have cerebral palsy. There can be things like maternal drug use, and that we have also can also cause learning disabilities.
Right.
And when your kids are adopted, you really don't know what's caused it because there's a lot of things that come into play.
And you don't have all the information. You don't necessarily know everything that they went through while they were in the womb. I guess.
And so I'm going to tell you the hardest thing for us, as far as those who are fostering or adopting will kind of identify with this.
Right.
When you're raising children that are not genetically yours, you don't recognize some traits. So when you're raising your biological children, you see things in them and you're like, oh, that's just like Danny, or that's just like me, or I used to have this problem. And this is how I dealt with this. And then Danny will come and say, well, this is how I dealt with this. But when you adopt children, you don't recognize their traits sometimes. So you really have to really pay attention to things, and there's things that you don't recognize. So this is where all of our research has come from, because and that's what Danny asked me. He said, how did we end up going down this rabbit hole? And it was because
how did we get here?
How did we figure this out? And it was because we were having so many troubles or problems with basic stuff, that the kids should know. And so I started pursuing that and researching it and talking to friends. And we actually have even gotten Jaden tested for dyslexia and ADHD. So anyway, all of that came into play.
And he tested positive for both.
Yes, he does have both. So how this affects, learning disabilities affect your reading, your ability to read, write, math, organization, planning, reasoning, long and short-term memory. So
Which that long and short-term memory is kind of what affects the, you know, the listening on a layman's terms. And like I'm the layman here. So on a layman's terms, it's like, why are you not listening? Why are you not doing what I asked you to do? Why can't you remember this? And it goes to that.
Are they actually able to?
Right.
And we're talking about, you know, how this is going to affect long-term. You're looking at your, you know, your schoolwork, your relationships with your parents, you know, your future relationships, and just life skills, you know. So like things like, you know, kids who have learning disabilities have problems doing new things, with communicating, managing their money, reading, writing, personal care. So these are all, these are life skills that you have to have in order to live on your own, pretty much.
Right.
And so our research here and us talking about this is really just trying to help our kids, again, be successful, learn these life skills so they can learn how to take care of themselves one day and to do well now.
And I just want to be clear, when we talk about them being successful, we're absolutely by no means talking about like financially successful or anything like that. We're
our photo bomber here is our kitty cat. He's exploring.
That's right. So we're not talking about financially being successful. We're just talking about being successful as a human being.
Right.
Just being able to take care of yourself, being able to hold down relationships, being able to carry on a conversation and communicate with people. And, you know, just actually a lot of things that people take for granted that they're able to do, teaching our kids how to do these things. So when we say, hey, we want our kids to be successful, basically what we're saying is we want our kids to be able to not fit into society, but be able to adapt to society, I guess. Or not society, but just with the relationships, I guess.
When you look at levels of anxiety and depression, a lot of these are associated with people's ability to learn and to be in certain social situations.
Right.
Our ultimate idea of success really is that our children would become Christians and that they would follow Christ in everything that they do. But, you know, again, this goes back to if you can't read and comprehend the Bible, you know, how do you do that?
Right.
If you can't listen to what people are saying and be able to comprehend it, how can you do that? Definitely, you know, not that we don't want our kids to be financially successful, but that is not our idea.
Somebody's got to take care of us.
Yeah, right. So we're going to talk about four of our 5 adopted children. And the reason we're not going to talk about the 5th one is because she's 3. And so, what is the word? To be determined, TBD, to be determined.
To be determined, yeah.
So, or TBA, to be announced. We don't really know if she's going to have any learning disabilities, and if she does, what the level will be. So we aren't going to discuss her today. We have discussed some of our biological children. Because we have not, they don't have any clear-cut diagnoses, we're not going to really be able to talk about them as well. So we're not going to even bring them up right now. But the first one is Jaden. We already kind of have touched on Jaden. So Jaden, when we got Jaden, he was wild. I mean, he was like a wild child. He was 2. He couldn't speak. He absolutely knew no words. His communication was through screaming and groaning and moaning and all that.
And just going and doing whatever he wants to do.
Whatever he wanted to do, right. And so over just, you know, we didn't know how much of that, you know, you go through what's nurture versus nature, right. You know. So we really didn't know what the circumstances completely were that he came from. We knew some of it. And we won't go into too much of that because we definitely, when we talk about this, we are trying to look forward and how we can move forward. We try not to dwell on the past because we don't want to place blame or to cause hurt feelings to anyone that was involved in his life at that point in time. But anyways, so he basically he had to get a speech. We continued to have a lot of behavioral issues, you know, and we finally went to the doctor and said, I mean, he was in kindergarten and he had not learned any of his letters. He couldn't sight words, forget it.
Right.
He couldn't write them down. And I went to the doctor.
And he was just always
all over
busy,
the place.
just all over the place, constantly.
So they tested him at the school, and he was off the charts ADHD, you know. And so we go and sit down, and our doctor's like, "Well, I don't really like putting kids on medication, you know." And literally, like the whole time, that little plastic paper they sit on, it's like, the whole time, you know, because
like ants.
He's up, down, up, down, up. I mean, it's unbelievable when, you know, when he is his all natural. And so I finally said, you know, we were talking about, and I said, listen, I respect that. I said, I am not one to ask for medication. I said, but do you see what's going on here? Because she kept being distracted. She kept looking at him, you know. I said, this is him every day trying to learn. I said, in his brain, he cannot make his body sit still long enough to focus on one thing long enough to learn it. And I said, and that's what these papers are telling us. And she said, we'll try. Let's try a low dose. And so anyway, so we did end up putting him on medication for that. And I'm going to tell you what, that was a game changer for him.
It was like a new person.
And then even now, if he doesn't take his medication, his teachers will call and say, whoa, you know what.
And right after that, this is interesting. I don't know if Haley remembers this or not. And I'm sure once I tell her, she'll elaborate on it. But right after he got on his medicine, he started talking about his ear hurting.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? Mm-hmm. And he had an ear infection for, I don't know, a while. But we come to the conclusion that his mind couldn't slow down long enough to process the pain of his ear hurting. So he didn't know his ear was hurting, and we didn't know that it was infected. But once he got on his medication and it slowed him down enough, he realized, oh, I have my ears hurting.
Yeah,
and
he had literally never complained about anything hurting him. And he would fall and jump off of things and all that, and he never complained of pain. And it was because he didn't slow down long enough to process that information.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, before and after, before he went in, he knew, I think, so let's say with the alphabet, with the upper and lowercase, there's 52 letters. He only knew like 22. And literally a month after starting the medication, he knew 52, all 52, all the letters. And so we went.
So for you guys, and we were these people, like, I just want to be clear on this. We were these people. We didn't want our kids on medication. We didn't necessarily believe in medication. We felt like kids were being over medicated, and we didn't want that.
And I do think they are.
Yeah. And we didn't want that for our kids, but we knew we needed something. And when he got on that medication, even at the low dose, it completely changed our lives. So what we're saying is, if your kid needs medicine, it benefits him or them as well as yourself to get him on a low dose. Obviously, going on what your doctor tells you to do. Obviously, we're not giving any type of advice as far as if they should be on medicine or not, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of people that just are absolutely against it, won't put their kid on medication for any reason, and their kid is suffering for it.
Right.
So we just want to encourage you to if you're having that issue, to further look into it.
Right. And so ADHD, of course, is one of the biggest learning disabilities, and it's not as common, I don't think, as we treat, but it is actually becoming more common. Right. There's a lot of things go into it. Again, you look at the neurobiological issues that have gone on, and we do have children that are born a lot more prematurely that before weren't able to make it, and now they are. And so you have that neurological system not completely developing. We do have a lot of more babies born addicted to drugs, which also affects that neurological development. So I do think that there are more children now than ever that do have ADHD because of our modern medicine, and unfortunately because of all the drugs that we have in our society.
Right.
So again, let's move on from that to his dyslexia. So we then were able to, once he was able to sit down and actually work on things, we figured out that he was unable to process certain things. Reading and writing were so difficult for him. And to the point where everything was backwards, and he's writing things backwards, and he can't spell anything. And we were just at a loss because, our behavior was so much better. We learned our letters, and we go through first grade, and we just were at a loss because he could not read. So I finally, you can go through, my mind just went blank. The Shriners. So you can go through the Shriners. Local. Right. So for us, it was for the Shriners actually pay for your child to be tested for dyslexia. Right. If you apply, they choose certain children. So I applied for that because if you're to pay out of pocket to test for things like dyslexia, it can cost thousands of dollars out of pocket. Insurance doesn't always cover it. So Anyways, all that to say, we had him tested. He did test positive for dyslexia. They said that he couldn't remember numbers or words or the sound of words long enough to process it. So,
which makes it incredibly difficult when they can't read because of dyslexia, and then they can't remember what they hear.
Right.
So it makes
they can't write down what they see sometimes. And so they can, but it takes long periods of time and repetition. And you have to use multisensory learning. This is our word now, and you'll hear it a lot as we talk about disabilities. So you can't just say something and expect them to learn it. Right. You can't write something on a board and expect them to know it. You have to put your hands on it. You have to make it dramatic. This is this is just something like homework is an absolute. It takes so much energy out of you to work on things at home. But
it's exhausting. It
is exhausting. So Jaden did repeat the first grade, and now he did great in second grade, and now we're in third grade. And he's doing well, but there's a lot more independence.
Right.
And again, you go into your learning disabilities, and independence is where things really start to stand out. Right. And so we made like a 23 on a test. And we panicked about that, or I panicked about it a little bit. I don't think Danny did as much. And they literally worked on it for 2 weeks.
And he's just, he wasn't listening in class. Or
he just didn't think he had to listen.
Yeah, he wasn't following along. He wasn't listening. And that's the frustrating part. You're like, why are you not listening? And you don't really know if he's just, I guess, being disobedient and not listening, not doing what he can do.
Because he doesn't care.
Because he doesn't care. Or he just can't do it. And once again, we talked about this in our last podcast, just trying to find that line of them being lazy and where they're beginning to have issues. And where does that meet?
Right. Well, he has a great teacher who reached out to me and said, hey, what's going on here? And I sent her his whole dyslexia report. I told her, he's got to have multiple ways of input so that he learns things. And so we've done much better. But also I said, if you'll just let me know what we're going to be tested on, we will work on it at home. Right. And we do. And here's the deal. It just takes time and patience, and we're having to push and push and push.
It's repetitive.
Yes. So anyway, so moving on to Jackson. So Jackson has his own learning issues. So he is having a difficult time distinguishing between certain letters. So B and D are just interchangeable for him. He wrote a letter to Bab the other day.
And a lot of us dealt with that.
Sure.
But it seems to be more.
Here's but this is the difference though. It is a developmental thing. You're right. So all of our kids have at some point done that. But he's also repeating first grade because we did so poorly in first grade.
Time around.
We did poorly in kindergarten, and we did poorly in first grade. And so we knew. I talked to the principal. I said, "Listen, we're going to have to repeat." We went back and forth about it. We finally decided, okay, let's let him repeat.
Right.
And we are doing better, but it's still like I said, he wrote a letter to Bab the other day, and so at some point in time, this letters swapping and then writing numbers, transposing numbers should get better. Like as you mature.
Right.
Because part of it is developmental.
And almost all of everything's backwards.
Yeah, it is. It is
almost
backwards.
Everything's backwards. So we think he's writing dad.
Oh yeah, and he'll read it as dad.
Yeah, he'll read it as dad, but it's Bab. But like when he does his sixes are backward. His 5 are backwards. His 2s are backwards. Almost all of it. His 8s are not backwards. He's doing good on his 8s.
1s are good.
Yeah, 1s are good. But if you hit 10s and 12s and 16s and all those get backwards.
61 and
but he'll read them as 16 or 18 or
right. So obviously he's got a little bit of dyslexia as well. I have kind of gone back and forth on whether or not to test him. This is the point I think that I tested or had Jaden tested. But the question then becomes, how far are we going to take it and what are we going to do with it? So I kind of know what you're supposed to do with it. And so we're doing that. We're implementing multi-sensory learning techniques. And so I'll get him tested, I guess, if we don't feel like we get to a satisfactory end on this. So the teachers are aware of it. Like he has a hard time transcribing from the board, which was this was very familiar, because the same thing with Jaden is, the teacher would write something on the board and then they're supposed to write it in their assignment book, and they just literally cannot transcribe it.
Right.
And so when you have that issue, that goes along with dyslexia. So y'all can kind of see how we're kind of struggling here with certain things. Colton is having problems with recognizing his sight words. He's in the 1st grade also. Mm-hmm. It's like it's a new word every day. That's what I told Danny. I was like, he sees the word what? And he says, who? And I'm like, nope. Or how? And I'm like, how are you getting how from what? I don't even know.
Right. Hey guys, so if you're having any troubles like this with your kids, just put us in a comment down below if they're having trouble, if it's sight words, just, sight words, or if it's dyslexia or putting things backwards. Just put it in the comments. Let us know.
All right. So then as far as with Colton goes, Colton is in occupational therapy. So part of Colton's issues is this, his brain doesn't communicate well with each other.
The left hemisphere doesn't communicate with the right hemisphere.
So his right and left brain are not communicating like they should with each other. So part of his therapy has to do with this cross brain issue. Mm-hmm. And so when your brain doesn't cross like it should, there are some issues, and I'm sure I'm going to get some of this wrong, but so there are issues recognizing things. So part of our occupational therapy is recognizing or to strengthen that cross brain interaction. So Colton has his issues, and then Danilyn, hers comes across more as behavioral. But there's also a lot of sensory issues. She's avoiding, and she's also a seeker as well, of needing input.
Chews on everything.
That's the seeking part. And so, and with her, she's a little wild and uncontrollable at times too. But
everybody loves her.
But then she has the ability to kind of rein it in a little bit. So we really, it's like we said before, we really are trying hard not to put our kids on medication if possible.
Danilyn needs it, but yeah, we've pushed it off. Well,
and we're hoping part of it with maturity, you learn to control.
Right.
And I have seen her be able to control, like with Jaden, his was uncontrollable. I mean, his brain was doing this all the time. With her, she's able to rein it in a little bit. So we're hoping that she learns to kind of control it a little bit so that she can sit still, like her teacher wants her to. We've seen the principal. I mean, she's in kindergarten. We've already seen the principal this year once, and I said, what did he do? And she was like, nothing. So I almost called him and said, you need to do something next time so you can scare her. So basically, what we're doing is just telling you, like, all of our kids have some issues that we're dealing with. And
in the beginning, we were at a loss of what to do. And we started.
We're completely unprepared.
Right. Yeah, we were.
We had no idea that any of the kids had all this because they were so little when we got them. And, selfishly, we talked about, do we want to have children who have special needs? Right. And we just were afraid we wouldn't have enough time. Like, what if, and so, but here we are, and all of our kids have special needs. Right.
And a lot of these needs get overlooked because, they're not visual. They're not something that's silly you can see. Is a lot of it's behavioral and
or appears to be behavioral sometimes.
Yeah, or appears to be that way, right? So they get these type of kids get overlooked, or they get labeled as bad kids or kids that won't listen.
So basically, we want to just show you. I mean, your children can appear to be completely, I guess, normal, whatever that is, and yet still have issues with learning, and that the whole purpose of this is so that we're helping ourselves, and we're trying to help y'all as well in any way that we can
just to say, hey, we've learned this,
move forward.
Yeah, and to move forward with it, because it's super frustrating.
Right.
When there's not, and a lot of other people don't understand it. And I guess that's another reason we just kind of want people to know and begin to understand that, a lot of times these kids do have issues that you can't see, and that they're dealing with things, and that the kid's probably just as frustrated about things as you are, especially when you're telling them to listen memorize this or memorize that. And, it becomes really difficult for both parties. So we just letting you know what we went through and how we began to see the issues and then trying to start finding answers and how we've come to these conclusions.
So what we're going to do in the next couple of weeks is we're going to go through specifically some of the issues with learning disabilities, specifically some ways that you can look at your children and say, yeah, I can see where they have some of these tendencies. So we kind of briefly went over our children kind of to use them as an example. But things like dyslexia, ADHD, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, sensory or processing disorders, which we've kind of touched on already. We're going to kind of go over those, and we'll make it, as this sounds really boring when you say it, but we're going to make it as least boring as possible, because we really want you to be able to pinpoint in your kids things that you can work on, because again, we want our kids to be successful and we want yours to be as well. That's
right. So thank you so much for listening and watching today. If you would, go check out GuthrieFamily.blog. You can become a member down at the bottom of any one of those pages. We would love for you to become a member. Check us out on Facebook. We're all on Facebook. And always like and share. Give us a comment. And then on YouTube, our YouTube channel. We would love it for you to like and subscribe. Give us a comment down below on YouTube. And just let us know kind of some of the things that you might be dealing with. If your kids have some of these issues, or if you've taught or seen kids with these type of issues. Once again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.